Hi guys, welcome to another video discussion. This time our topic will be about varieties of English language. We will also be talking about language register. For most of you, you might have been wondering why across the globe we have different varieties of English. Why is it that we have American English, but we also have British English, Australian English, and we also have the Philippine English? For these questions, I think this discussion can answer your queries about why there are many varieties of English language existing across the globe. So our objective for this video discussion is to determine the varieties and registers of spoken and written English language. In order for us to communicate effectively, it is very vital that we know these different varieties and registers of both spoken and written English language. This is for us to have an idea as to the adjustments that we have to make when communicating with people using varieties of the English language. So before anything else, allow me to give you the definition first of these two terms that we will be using all throughout the discussion. First one is the varieties of English language. Varieties of English language refer to the various types of English language dialects that are practiced by people from all over the world. So as what I mentioned a while ago, we have different varieties. We have the American English, we have the British English, the Australian English. We also have Philippine English. Also in Asia, we have the Singaporean English and the Chinese English, also known as the Chinglish. Another term that we need to know is language register. Language register is the appropriateness of writing and speaking styles. This also serves as a guide for most writers and speakers in the use of appropriate grammar, sentence structures, and vocabulary. The language register here refers to the appropriate language that we need to use depending on the context or the nature of the communication process. So for example, if it is a written form of communication, then it has specific registers to be used. Also, same is true when it's spoken communication. It has also specific registers that must be used when communicating with other people. So let's begin with the varieties and registers of spoken and written English. Since I already had my discussion about globalization, let's have a brief orientation first on how globalization could really impact these varieties of English language. Globalization leads to different complexities and varieties of communication processes. Communication has developed different communication styles, which are all results of globalization. Many linguists and experts acknowledge different forms of Englishes worldwide. That is the reason why, as to the question if there is really such thing as dominant English, well, in the perspective of linguistics, we could not really say that there is such thing as dominant English variation or variant, because what all we could say is that all Englishes across the globe are equal in terms of dominance. It's just that there have been a number of prescriptions with regard to the variety of English that needs to be used in specific contexts. So for example, if we are here in the Philippines, basically we use the American English, not only in BPO industries, but also in other forms of communication, such as academic and professional communication. World Englishes come in different forms. One term or word may have the same meaning, but may be used in different approaches. So while American and British Englishes are deemed as the correct, good, or proper forms of English, there are also other forms or varieties of English around the world which are also valid and legitimate. One good example for that is our very own Philippine English. Using English is more than just the mastery of all its grammatical and linguistic complexities. So when we use the language, you have to be very careful with your purpose and context in delivering your message to your target audience. For example, if you're here in the Philippine context, basically, you could not use frequently British English. Aside from the fact that people might ridicule you for using British English in this country, some might not be able to understand the manner you deliver the message. Maybe the neutral English that we have here, or the so-called Philippine English, would be more appropriate to be used in this context, given the society and the speech communities that we have in this country. Philippine English is in fact one of the varieties of Englishes in the world. There are expressions, terms, and words that Filipinos use in English which may be different from any other variants of English. For example, if we are to search this one in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, you could not find the word barkada or fiesta. However, when we use this in the Philippine context, it's acceptable. It's a form of Philippine English. So when we say, I have to go out with my barkada, it's okay. It's also acceptable to say we have to celebrate fiesta instead of saying we have to celebrate festival, the festival. Okay? So these are some words in the Philippine English which are already accepted in some other dictionaries such as the Oxford Dictionary. Another term is buko juice. So in the Philippine English setting, buko juice, when used in an English sentence, it's acceptable. So it's okay when you say, I have to drink buko juice this recess, okay, or this mealtime. That's okay. But in the other contexts, such as American English, when you could not really find buko juice, and instead of saying buko juice, you should say coconut juice. Okay? Now, when we talk about language register, it is defined as the appropriateness of the level and style of speaking and writing. It guides a speaker or a writer in the use of vocabulary, structure, and grammar. Now, when we communicate, one thing that we always need to remember is the nature of the communication process. Why is there communication existing in the first place? That's the biggest question there. So if you are faced with that communicative event, you have to clearly identify the purpose why you are communicating with another person or with a group of people. Through that, you would know the register that you will use when communicating. So at least 3 language registers have been identified as the most common ones. First one is formal language register. So the formal register is the style of writing or speaking for unfamiliar audience or readers or for your superiors in an office. Because in this formal register, we really use formal or standard words for us to convey the message, the right message towards our readers or our hearers or listeners. Informal register, or also called as casual or intimate register, is recommended when writing or speaking to friends and familiar persons. So this is the casual or the conversational way of communicating, may it be written or spoken in form. The third one is neutral register. This register is the more objective, impersonal, and factual type of writing or speaking. It's not too formal, it's not too informal as well. Okay? Now, it's very important that we know the distinction among these 3 because this is where we start understanding the usage of language in various contexts. First one is formal register. As mentioned, it's the type of speaking or writing appropriate for formal speeches, articles, studies, technical reports, announcements, business letters, and emails for business purposes. So when we talk about academic and technical writing, then we use formal register. When it's public speaking, you also use formal register. Formal register is when you use formal language so that you could effectively convey the message towards your audience. Now, there are a number of rules which govern the use of formal language register. And these are as follows. First one is the use of the third person. For example, instead of using I, the reporter, for example, instead of saying the undersigned, you may use the undersigned instead of saying I. Or instead of saying the reporter, you may use the reporter instead of saying he or she. Okay? So you may use third person point of view so that you could effectively channel the message towards your audience. Second one is avoid contractions. Now, this is a big no-no when formally, we're communicating formally towards an audience. Instead of saying won't, okay, and can't, you have to use would not or cannot. However, note that apostrophes are used to show possession, as in Anna's law office, so you have to distinguish that one. However, contractions, as we all know, are shortened version of auxiliary and some negation. Okay, for example, wouldn't, couldn't, shouldn't. So instead of using this in formal language, you have to spell them out. Okay, that's the formal way for us to communicate. The third one is when we write numbers. So we need to spell out numbers which are below 100. Okay, and then use formal words rather than slang and cliches. Examples of slang are cool for very good or dough for money. For example, you are asked by your supervisor, how was the presentation a while ago? And then you answer your supervisor, it was dope. Okay, using the word dope is out of context. Okay, meaning you could not use that one given the relationship that you have with the person whom you are communicating with. Given that you are communicating with a higher up or a supervisor, then it is very important that you use formal register. Acronyms may be used in formal speaking and writing, but you have to spell it out first and put the acronym in parentheses. Example, if it is your first mentioning of the term non-government organization, then you have to include a parenthesis with its acronym, NGO. And then in the next mentioning, you may simply use the term NGO instead of using the fully spelled words non-government organization. And then use complete sentences in your write-up or speech. It's very important that when writing formal speeches, you use concrete and complete sentences. Avoid using fragments or dependent clauses. Okay? The use of active rather than passive sentences is preferred. So you may use or you may say, a singer entertained the guests instead of the guests were entertained by a singer. Same is true when writing academic papers. It's also suggested that you use active voice so that the readers could really know who the doer is or what the subject or the topic is all about in a given sentence. Simple sentences rather than compound and complex sentences would help make your write-up or speech shorter and easier to understand. That is very true. If you really want to be easily understood by your audience, then you have to use simple sentences only. However, be careful with the use of simple sentences because sometimes the tendency is that your sentences or ideas would sound or appear choppy. So you have to make sure also that there is coherence and cohesion when writing your ideas. You may also use conjunctions to indicate transitions or imply continuity or cause and effect relationship in the ideas of your sentences. Conjunctions such as subordinating conjunctions such as however, nevertheless, similarly, on the other hand, could definitely help you relate or show contrast in the ideas in your sentences. Now, these are just few of the tips that I can give you when it comes to making sure that you use the formal language for a formal communicative event. Okay. Next one is the informal language. This type of register is used for informal and friendly letters or speeches for your acquaintances, friends, and family members, thus written in an informal style. So this is the language that you use when you conversationally talk with someone. It doesn't have to be that formal. Okay. This is the type of writing you adopt for short messaging system. For example, the text messages where we use shortened versions or contractions, or when you write friendly letters, the tone is also different. It's informal, personal emails, diaries, journals, and blogs. So when you use journals or when you write journal entries, diaries, or blogs, then you could use the creative writing style, okay, the literary style. And then informal writing is the opposite of formal letters. Hence, it does not require formal and strict rules to follow. Here, you may use figures of speech, personal pronouns, symbols, acronyms, slangs, and even incomplete sentences, phrases, and glosses. Because the goal here is for you to informally relay the message towards your audience. It doesn't have to be formally structured, the sentences I mean. So you may use informal languages or informal registers such as slangs, okay, shortened versions, contractions, all of these may be used when you use informal registers. And lastly, we have the neutral language or the neutral register, which is neither formal nor informal. Thus, this one is applicable for non-emotional and factual themes. This style of writing or speaking is usually seen in articles, technical reports, and magazine reviews. Now, There are also some documents which really do not apply, or where formal language is not really applied, because sometimes you have to consider also the reading audience. If you believe that the reading audience has no full knowledge about what they are reading in your article, then you may use an everyday language so that the content of your article may be fully understood by your audience. Okay? So that is neutral language. Now let's talk about varieties of language. The different kinds of English language used around the world led to the varieties in the use of English. The reason for this is definitely historical. England used English as its native language for more than 1,000 years. However, eventually, the use of English spread in many parts of the globe like Canada, USA, and Australia because of migration, employment, and economic reasons. Since language is dynamic and culture bound, the differences in culture eventually resulted in changes in the original English language. That is where varieties of the English language started. There are at least three main varieties of the English language. We have the British English, American English, and the Australian English. However, variety and even sub-varieties have been noted in other countries where English is used. So there may be varieties in spelling. For instance, color in American English, color in American English is color with a U in British English. So as mentioned, we have different varieties of English. I believe most countries really have their own form of English, variety of English. We have the Chinglish, the Singlish, the Philippine English. These are all varieties of the English language in the Asia. On the other hand, we also have to take note that varieties have been observed in terms of grammar. For instance, for British speakers, they would say, have you eaten all those fruits? While for Americans, they would say, did you eat all those fruits? This is due to the fact that British English at times use the present perfect tense of the verb, whereas American English would prefer using the simple past tense. More examples will be seen below, and these are some of the examples. For example, when you say British English, have you eaten all those Happy Bee fried chicken? American English, did you eat all those Happy Bee fried chicken? Okay, British English, have you ever watched the TV series Ang Provinciano? American English, did you ever watch the TV series Ang Provinciano? So there's really a difference when it comes to the usage of verbs, even the structure. For tag questions, the following varieties were observed between, or variations were observed between British and American English. For British English, we have, I'll upload these pictures on my Facebook. Will I? American English, I'll upload these pictures on my Facebook, right? So if you notice, there is a difference in terms of the phrase, the statement, or the word used for tag questions. British English uses will I, okay, while American English uses the word right. Still, variety in English was noted in the use of prepositions. For instance, the British would say the time is 15 minutes past 5. For Americans, they would say the time is 15 minutes after 5. Okay, the other one used past while the other one used after. For adverbs, the following varieties in informal speech between British and American English have been noted. In American English cases, in the use of adverbs without the ly ending. For example, American English, Tagaytay was real cold last February. British English, Tagaytay was really cold last February. For vocabulary, varieties of English could be seen mainly between American English and British English, the two most prevalent varieties of English. And since we talk about vocabulary, then we need to talk also about meanings or semantics. In some instances, variety between or variation between British and American English were seen, such as in the use of the word cab for Americans, while the British uses the word taxi, although both refer to only one the same thing. In the British English, we use lift, okay? But American English context, they use elevator. However, noted were differences in meaning in the use of the word quiet. In American English, the term quiet is used as an intensifier. For example, he was upset a while ago and that was all right, but now he's quite upset, so we have to leave. In British English, however, quiet is used to lessen the intensity of the term. He was upset a while ago, so I was thinking of leaving. Now he's still quite upset, but I think it's all right to stay. See, even with a single word in a sentence, because of variations of English, because of all these varieties of English language, we could see differences also in terms of semantics and syntax. Semantics refer to the meaning and syntax refer to the structure. even the vocabulary, the lexicons being used. So it's very important that if we really want to communicate effectively, we know these different registers. We know these different varieties of the English language. Because you might not know that, let's say you are in a specific place in a society, and then that society uses a specific variety of the English language, and then you're using another variety of the English language, you might not be able to communicate effectively. Although, understandably, both parties are using one language, and that is English. However, the variations with these two varieties will definitely cause misunderstanding, right? Or misconception about the things that you are saying. So, once again, I'd like to emphasize it is very, very important that we know these registers, that we know these varieties. Our knowledge of the different varieties of the English language would also give us the biggest or the greatest knowledge of how diversified we are in terms of language usage. Well, even here in the Philippines, we have different tones of using the English language. When you go to Luzon, the way they speak the English language is totally different from the way Mindanaoans or the Visayans use or speak the language. Okay? So culture is also one thing that we always need to consider when communicating. So I hope that you have fully understood my discussion about language registers and varieties of the English language. I will not delve more into the linguistic perspective of the varieties of the English language, specifically Philippine English, because it might take a long time before I could give all the details about Philippine English. But these are just the basics, all the things that you might want to know when it comes to how important these varieties and registers are in the context of communication. So if you have questions, can you post them in the open forum section? Thank you very much.